Hey everybody, welcome back to another Culz book reviews. Today we actually have a tie-in to an earlier Culz interview where we were able to talk to Gerard himself, and so he was so kind enough to send us this book, the Adamski book of UFO UAP disclosure, that he put together, he wrote. So obviously we wanted to read it, see what it was about, because it did come up in our interview. So if you haven't seen that, definitely make sure to check out that link above. So a big thank you to Gerard for sending this for us to read. And I'm excited to finally be able to review it for you guys. I do apologize. I was really hoping to get this done a lot earlier. We've just been super busy. I'm sure if you've kept up with the channel, we've been doing a ton. But luckily, you guys are watching this, which means it is going live. So let's dive into the book. Like I said, this is the Adamski book of UFO UAP disclosure, early evidence and the answers now confirmed by science philosophers, activists, and the military, by Gerard Aartsen. So, two quick terms: UFO, unidentified flying object; UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. UAP is kind of what it's going by now. If you've done any diving into the UFO world, extraterrestrial world, you'll definitely know that a lot of times people have a stigma when it comes to UFO. So I suppose that's why they've changed it to a UAP. But at the same time, it's definitely a UFO still. So just some new terminology. If you've seen that recent congressional hearing, when they talked about UFOs, they mentioned them as UAPs. Now, what does it mean by early evidence and answers now confirmed by science philosophers, activists, and the military? Well, with this book being called the Adamski book, it's going to look at George Adamski's photos and work, delving into the world of UFOs and how it compares to some of the stuff coming about. On the cover here, you see a photo, 1950, George Adamski, as well as the Tic Tac video that's become pretty well known. I think by the majority of even just like the general public knows about the Tic Tac video. What they believe in it, I'm not sure. That is kind of what has spurred, I guess, this pseudo-renaissance of UFO research by the government. At least as far as having a actual congressional hearing, something that I think like 5 years ago would have seemed completely bizarre. And so that was big. We've done a video on it if you want to hear more about that. Click the link above. But let's take a quick look at the cover itself. So right up top, again, there's the title, the Adamski book of UFO UAP disclosure, early evidence, answers now confirmed by science philosophers, activists, and the military. You see the background, looks like a starry night, kind of that dark cover with the lights of what would be the stars. You do have that 1950 photo, George Adamski, and then the Tic Tac one, and then Gerard's name. On the side, you see the title again, and then Gerard's name once more. On the back, you get a little brief description, as well as some of the information and bonus material you will get in this book. You also see a picture of Adamski himself. And there's the ISBN for you. Now, the main part of this book runs 80 pages, but like we saw on the back, there is bonus material. So you almost get 30 pages of bonus material, as you can see here. And this is definitely something that we discussed with Gerard. He was pretty proud to put this in the book. It is We Are Not Alone in the Universe. 6 essays on flying saucers and the significance of their appearances by, of course, George Adamski. And so you get all those in here, as well as a little bit other material, and we'll kind of just flip through to show you what the actual book it looks like on the inside. As you can see, there's actually a good amount of pictures and different sources as far as like news articles, some different pictures. Go through here some of the different reprints of Adamski's books. Like you can see here, lots of pictures. There's the controversial picture, and you know, Gerard does put in here, you know, was this one made obviously to look like the other? We'll get to it. George Adamski is controversial, which of course people are going to say that. There's going to be that misinformation put out there if George was actually putting out all this disclosure information on the UFOs, had these photos. So there's always going to be the two sides of the coins. Is really kind of the frustrating part of researching UFOs and trying to get to the bottom of anything really in this field. But let's talk about the book itself. So while this may be called the Adamski book, it actually delves into quite a bit of other topics outside of George Adamski. Now, it always does circle back and talk about something that Adamski had brought up. But there are some interesting tidbits that I did note while reading it. One of the things was just look at Stephen Greer and just his comments on, the information that's been out into the public now, again, with the Tic Tacs, and claiming that it's actually disinformation to scare the public. I just thought it was interesting. Stephen Greer's come up a lot on the channel, be it in our, panel discussions with different UFO experts, or we've, reviewed some of his films. But again, the UFO world, there's going to be detractors on both sides, much like Adamski. Greer has them as well. The book also brings up the military-industrial complex. Obviously, this is something that Eisenhower said in his farewell address. It's been brought up a ton. Pretty much any UFO thing. I mean, really even a conspiracy thing. We're getting into November. JFK stuff's coming up. You hear that a lot with JFK conspiracies as well. And then again, another note I took was, the book does again talk, going into Stephen Greer, targeting Elizondo and Corbell as disinformation artists, while others say Greer's promoting his own agenda. And so it does take a critical look at both Stephen Greer and then Elizondo and Jeremy Corbell. And this, again, is kind of where it gets hard. Who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth? We gotta work together. Like, if we want to find the truth, it would help to work together. I'm not saying either side's saying yay or nay, but yeah, guys, let's work together. A fun note I brought up, and something I definitely want to dive into more, was the 1954 Flying Saucer Forum in California that actually George Adamski attended. Something that I didn't know about. So that's intriguing. It's something I brought up with Sam, and definitely something I think we'll cover at some point in the future. Just to talk some of those early day kind of like UFO get-togethers where people are trying to, process information, tell stories, kind of that stuff is really interesting. It's always awesome to see where we came from, where we're going. Now, this does follow a path of different UFO books where it says the aliens came about at a certain time to warn us about the dangers of nuclear fission. You see this a ton. You see it even in Jeremy Corbell's stuff, in Stephen Greer, just because they were talked about earlier, where UFO sightings are around nuclear bases. And so, yeah, this is something I guess been kind of consistent, even dating back to George Adamski. And of course, earlier we did show you that scout ship. That's been super controversial. Obviously, you got a lot of people on one side and a lot of people on the other. It's something I think we'll talk about, but, I think Gerard does try to look at it from both sides and give you a fair assessment based on his kind of research into the material. I mean, heck, he even talks about Ray Stanford, who claimed he actually saw the UFO models. But once again, credibility with a witness comes up, and Stanford does, again, have those same issues. And that's, again, it kind of makes it frustrating, because who's telling the truth? How are we going to get to the bottom of this, Let's work together. Another little fun note, while I was reading it, we had just recently kind of done that UFO congressional hearing video, as well as our super show, where we talked about the alien mummies from Peru. And this one brought up actually the earlier 2017 ones that were, debunked. And so that was just a fun little connection I had there. And one more little thing, because I don't want to give too much away. Just little notes I wrote while reading this. But General George C. Marshall claimed there had been landings by aliens who were incinerated from within when breathing the heavily oxygen-rich environment. Yeah, so just some fun little notes. I always try to just give you some fun little tidbits of different notes I took, things I learned. So you guys definitely saw some things that I think we should cover. Definitely some weekly abduction episodes I think we could get out of this book. But how does this handle as a book? Honestly, I think it handles pretty well. It's definitely written a lot different than most UFO books. Personally, for me, I'm not a huge UFO book reader, mainly because a lot of times it's kind of the same story over and over and over and over and over again, and it's more just collections. Now, there are the rare ones. I know we did that one, 20th Century UFOs by John LeMay, that I really enjoyed because it focused on the history, and this one does a similar thing. It focuses on the history of Adamski, and it seems like Gerard is just trying to lay out the facts and research that he's done to let you lean one way or the other based on what you find within the pages of this book. And I do think it's well written. It didn't take me too long to read it. It didn't lose my interest. I actually, like I said, looked forward to reading the book. A lot of times with UFO books, do not feel that way at all. We've only done a couple. Again, because a lot of times it's the same thing over and over and over again. This thing, much more on the history. I learned more about George. Learned more about some of his work that I didn't know about. Learned about that forum that I want us to talk about on Weekly Abduction. So I definitely think there's some good stuff you can come away when reading this book. I honestly probably give it about an 8 out of 10. It's one of the better UFO books. I'm a huge history buff, so this one gives me that good dose of history with that sprinkling of UFO on top. So I think you can enjoy it. You know, there's going to be people that don't believe George Adamski, and there's people that believe George Adamski. I think if you are on either side of the fence, you can read this one and enjoy it. You know, at some point we'll definitely do a better deep dive into George Adamski and his photos and discuss some of that. And I don't know, I've done some research, especially after reading this book. I've listened to some podcasts, I've watched some videos about George, and all of them kind of paint him as like a really nice guy. So I don't know. I say go pick it up and read it. You know, Gerard was super fascinating to talk with, and he's a good writer. You know, I didn't lose focus. Everything seemed really lined out well. Didn't seem repetitive at any point. Again, that's my biggest turnoff with UFO books. Just they all seem super repetitive at points. It's just like, okay, it's the same. You know, and it's hard. I get it. You know, it's not like ghosts or cryptids where you can kind of go research at the same time and maybe see something that's the same thing. UFOs, like, say the Phoenix Lights, something we've talked about on the channel, really big event, Alan's seen it. We can go to Phoenix, you're not going to see it again, you know? And so, it's kind of the frustration of researching this topic. And so that's where I think it's really cool to document the history of how we're getting to where we're getting. George Adamski, whether you like him or not, was one of the first kind of big investigators. And, you know, he talked about a lot of stuff. His books were republished in different languages, different copies, different, you know, editions. It's kind of weird that he's fallen by the wayside. Even if, like I said, no matter how you feel about him, it's kind of like the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine Warren for ghost hunting have like this huge aura, and they're controversial as well. But they, you know, I don't know if it's because they did the movies or they were just out there more. I'm not sure. It's just weird that compared to like the Warrens for ghost hunting, Adamski has fallen by the wayside. So, if anything, at least the book at least gives Adamski his due and tells his story to a new generation when I don't know how many other people are trying to tell George's story anymore. So that's something that Gerard is keeping alive, is his story and his research and that stuff. So like I said, 8 out of 10. Go pick it up. I think you'll enjoy it. Make sure to go check out our interview with Gerard. He does have some other books, so go check those out as well. Hopefully here in the future we'll pick up some more and do some reviews. But until next time, for more Culz book reviews, click that link to your left. For more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click the link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, have you read the Adamski book of UFO UAP disclosure? And is there something you'd like us to discuss more about George Adamski?